Hey guys, Matt here, bringing you another episode of 12 Games in 12 Months. In this episode we're going to be covering the rendering system for Snake. So what we're going to do is we're going to double buffer it. And what that means is we're going to have we're basically going to render everything, and then we're going to recreate the image and then render it again, so we don't have any artifacts of the snake staying in the same place, because obviously the snake won't. So what we're going to do is we're going to declare two variables, so private graphics dbg for double buffer graphics, and then private image db image. Okay, now if we import them, we now need to create the paint method. So we come down here under start and just say public void paint graphics g. Okay, now this is actually a built-in method for Java, so if you add the override, you should see it change when you spell it correctly. It'll go great because it's overriding a component method of paint. So what we do here is right at the bottom, just going to say repaint, and that basically just calls the paint method again. Okay, so now we're going to say we're going to create the db image. So db image equals create image get width get height. Okay, and then we're going to create our graphics object. So dbg equals db image dot get graphics. Okay, so now instead of using stuff like g.draw or whatever, we're going to say dbg.draw, because it's going to have exactly the same thing. So we could say dbg.draw rectangle or whatever we want, and that will still work fine. Okay, so what we actually need to do is we need to finally, just before we repaint, we need to draw the image to the screen. Now this is going to be the one time we actually use g, so we're going to say g.draw image. That's going to be db image position 0 0 get width get height. In fact, we could just say 0 0 null. No need to add the extra parameters. So if we then look at this, the parameters it's taking is the image, the X, the Y, and the image observer. And because we won't have an image observer, we can completely ignore that. So if we just add something in here, so dbg dot draw rectangle, we'll draw it at 50, turn numlock on, 50, width of 32, height of 32. And 50. If we now run this, we should get a rectangle just drawn right into the centre of the screen. There we go. Now that's actually double buffered, so we can move that around all we like and it will just render a single square, and it won't render artifacts around the screen, which is what we actually want to do. So to avoid excuse me, any issues with confusion between dbg and g, what we're going to do is going to make another method, so render, and then we're going to pass dbg into that. So then we can create public void render graphics g, and then in there we can call g.draw whatever, and that will allow us to render our sprites, our snake, the food, all of that fun stuff. Okay, so how long are we at? We're at 4 minutes, we can continue. So now that we've actually got stuff able to render, we're going to create a quick method called pre-render. And that's going to be up here. In fact, no, we won't need a pre-render. We're actually going to implement the thread. So if you come up here to Extends JPanel, just add at the end implements runnable. Okay. Now that's going to ask us to add a run method. So add the unimplemented method, which is going to be public void run. Get rid of the stub and you can remove override. And just for tidiness sake, move it above main. Okay. So now what we're going to do in run, if we go all the way up to the top, we're going to create a new boolean, which is the true false value. Private boolean, and what we're going to call this, we're going to call this game over, and that's going to equal false. So to start with, it's not going to be a game over, we're still going to be playing. And then in our run method, we're going to say while not game over. So while you're still in the game, we're going to tick, which is going to be our update method. So if we add that here, okay, and then inside that, we're just going to also add a try catch. So try catch interrupted exception ex, and then ex dot print stack trace. And in here we're going to say thread dot sleep difficulty. Now what that's going to ask us to do is create a variable called difficulty. So we will, up here, we're just going to create a private int difficulty, and to start with, going to make that 120. Okay. Now if we come down to here again, what happens when the game ends? We want to pause so the player can see the game over screen. So we're going to copy that and put it down here. But instead of thread.sleep difficulty, we're going to sleep 5 seconds, so 5,000. So that's going to pause the thread, so it's going to display the win-loss thing for 5 seconds. Now this is just a preliminary thing, we will actually end up putting a menu in for the game over. But for now we're just going to sleep for 5 seconds, so it will show the screen, and then we can call start. And what that will do is it will restart the thread. So just add in here, new thread, this.start. And then in here we're just going to set difficulty equals 120. So just going to reinitialize the difficulty. Okay. So if we save that and run that, we're going to have a thread constantly running down there. Nothing's going to appear on screen because we're not rendering anything. So if we stop that, we can now create a new class. So in here, just create a new class, and we're going to call it segment. We're going to create a render method in here, so public void render graphics g.fillRect. So what we're going to do with this is we're going to fill the rectangle at xpos, ypos, and we're going to make 20 by 20 for the sprites. And now int xpos, ypos, and these are going to be private. In fact, no, they're not. They need to be public. So we're going to make these public ints. And I'm just going to create a constructor, public segment, int xpos, int ypos, this.xpos equals past xpos, this.ypos equals ypos. So what that's going to do is it's going to set these two, x position and y position, to the two passed in, which is why we say this.xpos, because then that will access a class variable, whereas this just access the pass variable. Now this render method is going to be called from our main method in the render. We're going to loop through a stack and then just call each method to render. And what that allows us to do is, excuse me, is we can eventually, we will have a sprite sheet or a tile set for the game, and we can then change g.fillRect to g.drawImage, and then we can draw the sprite. So the final thing we're going to do is, in snake main, we're going to build the very basics of our snake. So we're going to create a stack, and it's going to be a private stack, and then in brackets segment snake body equals new stack segment, and then add brackets to the end. Now if you import that, now a stack is a very useful part of Java. It's similar to an array list, except it comes with a few different methods where you can push and pull, pop things from the top and the bottom, and it's a very well ordered list, so we will be using them, and I'll explain a bit more about them in a later tutorial. So for now, that's it. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you next time. Bye.